Meeple.com.
So there is one big difference between the price that we have right now and the price action that we see and the overall, the macro event than we've ever had before, which is there's now a real return on cash, which has never really existed for the whole life of Bitcoin. You can park your cash in T-bills and get paid 5.5%.
Yeah.
That's a pretty damn good return. And now you like Bitcoin and all assets, not just Bitcoin, Apple and Amazon and ETH and everything has to compete with. There's now a real return on cash. And so there's a lot of people that are like, I'll take 5.5%. That's pretty good. It's below my mortgage rate. I'm basically making money, arbing that. And I'm just going to run with that. I'm not going to invest in other stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. So I was thinking about this today. Again, I think about a lot of things, apparently. Trading onions. You say 5.5%. Like a lot of people are comfortable with 5.5%. We have a product we're going to market with where we're trying to make it so people that hold Bitcoin can get yield on their Bitcoin in a legitimate fashion at like 10%, right? And so 10 to 13%. And, we're going on, we're kind of like testing this with, product market fit, talking to people, does this make sense? And
hey.
Should we have had a trigger warning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should have.
Oh, you don't like this idea?
Oh, I love the idea of getting 10% yield on my Bitcoin, but hey.
Well,
do you remember who used to sponsor this podcast?
Oh, yeah. Well, look at that. Well, we're not sponsoring. We're actually doing
that. That's a good point.
Yet.
We'll talk about, so there's a reason why.
Hold on.
Well, let me just close out the point real quick. Like we've been talking to some people about it, and for some reason, people that are on the Bitcoin side that are trying to get yield on it are all fixated on 10%. Everyone's like, I need 10%. It has to be double digits. And you just said, a lot of people are comfortable with 5.5%. And, I hear like we can do these interest rate trades where it's like 17%. And I just don't understand, like, would you not be comfortable with 7% or 8% yield on your Bitcoin? Like, why is it 10?
So when you say yield on your Bitcoin, everybody that's listening to this podcast right now is thinking, BlockFi, all my money's gone. I'm poor.
We know how this plays out. You offer yield on the Bitcoin. You sponsor my podcast. 12 months later, you bust, and everyone blames me.
And so here's what happened. And so here's the reason. The reason this is actually different is because there is actual proof of work. There is demonstrable economic activity happening. You can monitor that there's actual like mining rewards being produced. You're just giving up some of the yield or some of the margin that you would produce from that mining yield to somebody that financed your operation. So that's why there's actual economic activity.
Walk us through it.
Hit him, Matt.
Explain it like I'm Pete.
Yeah,
step by step.
I will. It's
I've got 10 Bitcoin.
It's quite simple actually. So all right, you have 10 Bitcoin.
I'm giving you my 10 Bitcoin. Give me I want to.
Okay, so you have 10 Bitcoin and you want to put it to work.
I want 0.7 Bitcoin back.
Right. You're tired of it just sitting there in cold storage and it's doing nothing, right? Okay. So that's what you have. And you want to get, let's say you want to get 10%.
Yeah.
Okay, on the other side, there's a miner, and he has, let's say in this scenario, he has 30 petahash, and he wants to sell that forward, right? He wants to get Bitcoin up front for future production on his mining operation.
Yep.
And the reason he wants to do that is because he doesn't want 15 to 18% from a financier. He doesn't want to issue equity to be dilutive. He just wants Bitcoin up front so he can buy more machines. And he wants to grow his operation in a non-dilutive way.
Why does he want the Bitcoin, not the dollars? Or does he not care?
He doesn't care. Like, maybe he has to convert the Bitcoin to dollars, or maybe he can fund his ASICs deals with Bitcoin. I don't know. Like, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Bitcoin or dollars doesn't matter. But in this scenario, you have Bitcoin. So you give the Bitcoin up front, and what you're doing is you're getting his future production of hash rate starting day one. And let's say it's a 180-day contract. Okay, so every day you're getting his production. But what you're doing is he's selling it at a discount. So he's locking in a discounted hash price at 10%. And you're buying it cheaper. And then what you do, this is where it gets a little complicated, you use our cash settled instrument and you sell that hash price to hedge it, and you lock in that yield. So now you've bought it at a low price and sold it at a higher price that's 10% higher. And now you get 10% yield on your Bitcoin for 180 days, annualized.
The risk is that Luxor goes under, but the reason Luxor would go under is because the miner stops producing hash rate.
Yeah. So
there's collateralization requirements for when a miner, for how much a miner is able to sell, that sort of thing.
Yeah, actually, this is an important piece. I shouldn't have glossed over this. So the risk is with the miner, right? You're not the risk because you already gave me the Bitcoin. You're already fully collateralized. The miner, however, they have to deliver the hash rate. They have to do as much as they said they did, and then they have to weather all the operational risks that they have.
Okay.
Plus, there's also the flight risk. They could just pick up and point their hash rate elsewhere, not be on Luxor Pool, and then, we're left holding the bag. But Luxor's job in this scenario is to de-risk the situation. So we'll take margin from the miner. We could do liens on their ASICs. We could have them overcommit hash rate and put it into escrow. There's a number of different ways we could do it. We could do it TradFi ways.
And you're doing due diligence on them as well.
Oh, that's where it starts. So we have very good information on the miners through the pool, right? So we know how much hash rate, how long they've been with us, what their uptime is, what their energy costs are. We've KYC'd them. So we have all the background, and we only deal with, A-rated miners in this scenario that we're very comfortable with.
In which geography?
What's that?
Is it like US?
US based now, yeah.
Actually, that's another good point. Like, from a credit or a risk profile, you don't want someone whose whole fleet is in one space, right? Because that adds operational risk. I mean, you can do it, but it adds risk. Ideally, they have geographical dispersion and redundancy, but that all goes into this risk modeling and how we handle it.
And could my loan be dispersed and distributed amongst a bunch of different miners that de-risks it?
For sure.
Okay.
It absolutely could be. Yeah. So we've been working on this. We've done 4 or 5 test trades on it. We're trying to go to market with it by the end of the month.
Okay. So
the
risk.
It does look like a loan, but the product is actually a buy and sell agreement.
It's a purchase and sale agreement. It's what's called a spot transaction. We're having full regulatory and legal review right now, so I can bore you with that. But it is it's definitely on the up and up, and it's just you see this in every commodity. It's just a forward sale, and all you're doing is you're putting up Bitcoin, you're getting future production from the miner, and it just comes at a 10%.
And the reason it's at 10% is because it's better than borrowing, because if they go out and try and borrow in
15 to 18%. Yeah, it's better. It's better for everyone.
Yeah.
And 10%, like, it's not, I don't want to overpromise. It's not always going to be 10%. It's going to be based on what the market dictates.
Market, yeah.
But if the miner stops mining, what do? You call them up and say, what the fuck are you doing? Or do you go take control of their ASICs and sell them off?
It depends on the use case, right? Like, typically what we'll do is we'll withhold a certain percent of the upfront fee. Like, so if you give them 10 Bitcoin, we'll actually just give them 7. And then we'll use that 3 in case of interruptions. So we can just kind of step in if they're down because of a fire or weather or whatever. We use that 30% to kind of keep making you whole and getting you your payments. And if shit hits the fan, we step in, and we're the one that guarantees it.
I mean, if you can make this work and it does work, you're going to have is an oversupply of people willing to loan Bitcoin. Oh, it's exactly what happened with BlockFi, Celsius. There was a massive oversupply of people with Bitcoin sat there in cold wallets who wanted to get an upside, and in the end, there wasn't enough borrowers.
Right.
That's why the prices got forced down so much.
I think that's good for the mining space because they're going to get much better. But yeah, I mean, you're right. There's going to be competition for this, 100%. But
I mean, my thing is, like, how risky is this product for Luxor as a fucking solid business?
So the big blowups in the last cycle, with folks that took big mining loans, they were taking loans to buy future machines. And so all of the miners that went bankrupt or had any sort of missteps along the way, taking on debt to buy machines in the future, that's incredibly risky because you're taking on a bit, not just operational risk, you're now taking like delivery risk too. So you have and in mining, you'll know that hash rate that's online is much more valuable than hash rate that's going to come online, because hash rate that's going to come online still needs to be manufactured, shipped from China, delivered on the right time, plugged in. You need to have all your power and transformers. All of that stuff has to line up, which is significantly more complex. In this case, we're going to miners that have already overcome all of that complexity and have machines up and running already. Once you have the machines up and running, the risk is much, much lower. But
that's actually a really good point. Like typically, going back to how we evaluate the miners. So the miners that we're dealing with, not always, but 99% of the time will be people that already have hash rate online. We can see how it's performing and see what their uptime percentage is over time. So if they're selling, 100 petahash forward, the expectation is they already have 100 or 200 or 300. And so
yep. Absolutely.
We're just helping them grow.
Is it one of those things that works in a bear market and then there's potential overexuberance during a bull market? Because it feels like there's this 1 year period that everyone blows up because it's like, oh, this bull market's different. Price is going here. I can do this. And people just get over leveraged and screw every single fucking time.
Right.
Like your product, as great as it might be, is going to introduce some leverage into the market.
Right.
And is that lots of miners are suddenly thinking, look, the price is good, let's go and borrow. And then, the bull market isn't as big as everyone hopes. It doesn't last as long. We get some blow-ups that you guys are left holding the bag.
Especially if you're taking some collateral in ASICs, which has clearly not worked in the last cycle.
Yeah.
No, and to be honest, we want to avoid that as much as possible. We do, I think in scenarios, you'll put liens on the ASIC or take ASICs as collateral. But yes, you're right. It's a shitty way of modeling it out.
Well, and also it's a shitty way because the prices of ASICs is volatile. And, people,
totally.
S19 Pro is worth 11,000 now. It's suddenly worth 1,500.
1,500,
yeah. I mean, if you can
no one wants to fucking buy them.
Right.
If you can do,
they do actually. We're selling a lot of them, but yeah.
If you could do it right, there's a lot of, the reason it's hard with the ASICs is you have to go through the default and, getting those and then getting them plugged in and all that kind of stuff is a pain in the ass. But to do it right, if you had a deal or owned your own hosting facility and you were in charge of where the ASICs are, it would become much easier to do.
Even less risky, right? Yeah. I mean, taking out the delivery portion, which is what caused a lot of the turmoil in the mining, it's called MiFi, miner financing market in 2021. Taking out the delivery component is a really big factor because you write these contracts. So here's an example: the biggest mining manufacturer is Bitmain. They would say, "Oh yeah, we're going to ship in December," and so you would write contracts where the loans would start in December. They would issue the payments. The first, and then they would say, okay, we're gonna have the machines online by March, and in March you start your first payment. Okay, so that to pay back the loan. Well, Bitmain or whoever, I shouldn't call it just Bitmain, but whoever has production issues or things are delayed or for whatever reason, the machines don't show up until March. Now it takes you 3 months to get online fully, and you're now 6 months behind on payments because and so that causes a lot of disruption.
Yeah, I mean the difference here is you have to have the hash rate already, and you have to make payments starting day one, and your payments are coming from the hash rate itself.
By the pool,
through the pool, but from your ASICs.
So it's I'm not saying so. It's not a 0% risk.
But nothing is.
Anything that generates yield has some inherent risk.
But the truth is,
obviously trying to reduce that risk, but there is still risk, certainly.
I think what separates this product is the ability to hedge your revenue risk from the miner. So you could be, if you're a miner selling your hash rate forward, you could use our cash settled instrument and de-risk yourself from a revenue perspective and de-risk your exposure to difficulty and transaction fees. And that makes, nothing's perfect, right? But it's a lot less risky than what we've seen previously.
It's very interesting.
It's going to be a very interesting the next year is going to be really, really interesting. There's a bunch of products that Matt hasn't mentioned and is not able to, I don't know if one of them you can't mention, but coming up in 2024, which are going to be super exciting. And I think it's going to be
2023.
Yeah, well, we have more in 23. I don't know if you want to get into the energy hedging structured products or anything like that. I find that to be probably one of the most interesting things, especially for scaled miners, is where you build a full hedging strategy for somebody that includes hedging the HODL. Somebody say has 10,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. They buy energy in ERCOT and they produce 10 exahash. build them a hedging strategy that comes together over the course of, say, 2 years, and implement that. And basically, that's all of your hedging, all of your inputs, energy costs, all of your outputs, which is your hash price, and then also everything that you make in between, which is your HODL, your market, your balance sheet.
Yeah, I mean, what miners need is a one-stop shop to hedge out all the risks, right? You have your treasury risk, your energy risk, and your revenue risk. And right now, there's limited tools for your revenue risk. We're one of the few, although I think that market's growing. And then
it certainly is, yeah.
Yeah, and then energy, energy is tricky, right? Because it's on a use case basis, like where your region is, what your energy source is, that sort of stuff. But I just don't think people have the expertise, and they're either hiring it or they're outsourcing it. And I think Luxor would be one of the outsource components of that.